Welcome to our weekly maritime video blog. I'm Corey Ransom with International Maritime Security Associates. This week, we're talking to the Admiral. If you are a regular subscriber to our video blog, you know in the past we've talked about the Coast Guard. It's one of my favorite topics. Obviously, as you know, I spent 8 years in the Coast Guard. Today, we have an exclusive special guest who's joining us just to talk about Coast Guard and Coast Guard operations here in District 7. We have Admiral Peter Brown. I had the opportunity and the fortune to be able to serve under Admiral Brown back when he was a commander of the tactical law enforcement teams. So we do have a little bit of history, and we're just really appreciative that you take the time, Admiral, to talk to us about District 7 and your operations here.
Well, thanks, Corey, for the opportunity to talk to you and your viewers, and I look forward to it.
Awesome. All right, let's just jump right into the first question. So I know that through your Coast Guard career, you've had the opportunity to serve on shoreside units, on afloat units, headquarters units. So with that experience, how do you look back on that, and how do you feel that's really kind of prepared you for the missions and operations and the command here at District 7?
Well, District 7 to me is a unique and special place. It borders the Caribbean, 34 foreign nations and territories, and I spent actually about half my career here and then half in some of those other places and other jobs. And it always leaves me wanting to come back here. The variety of missions here, the partnerships that we have, both internal to the U.S. government, with maritime industry, and with those international partners, give this just a special vibe that's different from every other place I've served.
This was in my 8 years in the Coast Guard. As you know, I never left District 7. Grew up in Iowa, landed in Florida, and I said, hey, I think I found where I want to live the rest of my life. So I completely understand the draw to come back here. One of the things I wanted to focus on a little bit was this past hurricane season. This was a really unique and interesting hurricane season because of the number and strength of the storms that we have. So from a perspective of a command perspective, how do you prepare the Coast Guard units in District 7 for hurricane evasion, but then on the backside of that, the hurricane response that you guys are deeply involved in?
Well, there's a bunch of different threads to that question, and one of them actually goes back to my history in the Coast Guard. So my first duty station was in Puerto Rico. And so we experienced some storms down there, and through my other tours here, I experienced the 2004, 2005 hurricane seasons in South Florida. And one of the things that experience has helped me and the other people that I serve with here is foresight, looking far, far ahead at storms. You know, we in the 7th District, we care about Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. They're part of our op area. So we're looking kind of 1,000 miles ahead of where the storms are before they impact Florida. And so because we have Coast Guard units stationed in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, it's incumbent on us to get our people and our assets out of the way of the storm to the extent that we can, and then in position to respond again after the storm as quickly as possible afterwards to perform life-saving search and rescue, and also to get the ports back open. I think one of the things that was really unique about the 2017 hurricane season was it really pointed out the importance of the maritime transportation system in sustaining the economy, not only of South Florida, it's important here, but it's absolutely vital to the islands of Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Almost all of their critical commodities flow through the sea, and getting the ports back open was a big part of that.
With that, as we've seen, this has been a really extended recovery for Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands just because of that. It's not, if we take a hurricane hit here in South Florida, we can bring in power trucks from all over the United States. But as you said, basically everything to the islands comes by vessel. How has this extended recovery period affected Coast Guard operations?
Well, in a couple of different ways. One is because we have a bunch of Coast Guard members and families in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, one of the things we did was we tried to move the family members out of those places as quickly as we could, in some cases before Hurricane Maria hit, in some cases shortly afterwards, because we didn't want to further burden the relief effort that we knew was going to have to take place for the islands. And so for a period of up to about 3 months for some families, they were here in South Florida, going to school, taking care of their family needs as best they could, while Coast Guard members, both the ones who work there on a daily basis in Puerto Rico, but also hundreds of Coast Guard members from all over the country flew into Puerto Rico to try to assist in the recovery effort, both for the island in general, but also for the Coast Guard facilities, which were significantly damaged down there. In fact, just this week, full commercial power was restored to our Coast Guard Air Station in northwest Puerto Rico for the first time since Hurricane Maria, a 5-month period of time. So the recovery has been a long one, but the Coast Guard is committed to staying in Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. We did ask for and get some supplemental money from Congress to help restore, rebuild, and make our facilities more resilient down there. Coast Guard families have returned to Puerto Rico, and we expect Coast Guard families to be assigned there in the normal course of business in the future.
When you look at that now, I guess is kind of the after-action report side of the hurricane. Are there things now that you guys have looked at from the Coast Guard perspective to say, hey, here's some things that were brought to light through these storms that now we know, hey, we need to make some changes on kind of how we do what we do when it comes to the hurricane preparedness, and just to make sure our facilities are hardened and ready to be able to go through something like this?
So I think one of the things that that really came out to me in this hurricane season, specifically related to Coast Guard facilities, was what I call the convening power of Coast Guard facilities in San Juan, where we have our Coast Guard sector and a housing area for those families, and in Borinquen or Aguadilla, northwest Puerto Rico, where we have an air station and a housing unit there as well. Those became kind of the nucleus around which the federal family formed up, particularly in northwest Puerto Rico. So it's not just the operational capability of the Coast Guard, it's having a housing area, it's having a Coast Guard exchange, having a community center. All those things provide kind of a center of gravity and competence around which others were able to congregate and pull together an interagency team that got the recovery rolling.
And that's really important to be able to have that community when you're talking about disasters and disaster recoveries, because it's a lot easier way to assess what's going on, but also to be able to get the help where it needs to go.
Right, and the partnerships that are developed in the course of normal day-to-day life and operations, particularly outside the continental United States, then are in place already when some kind of disaster or major operation hits. And so we have a saying that it's a bad time to exchange business cards, when you first need to. So it's much better to establish the relationships ahead of time. And the day-to-day presence of Coast Guard members and Coast Guard facilities, particularly in Puerto Rico, proved to be kind of that vital connective tissue that helped us respond.
I want to change gears a little bit, but still kind of talk about the hurricane. I know drug smuggling is an issue here in District 7. I dealt with that on the cutters and the patrol boat that I was on, also on the tactical law enforcement teams. And that was one of our primary law enforcement missions. Through the hurricane season, have you seen the smuggling scale back at all, or has it ramped up, or how has the hurricane season really affected the drug operations?
The hurricane season really didn't affect drug flow as much as it affected migrant flow. I'll talk about the drug flow first. So drug flow from South America toward the north continues. In fact, unfortunately, cocaine production is up in the source countries of South America. As you were so effective in your work countering drug trafficking in the Caribbean a couple decades ago, drug smugglers have shifted some of their operations to the Eastern Pacific. And so the vast majority of cocaine that's flowing toward the United States now comes through the Pacific and Central America, but smugglers never completely abandon a tactic or route that works. So we continue to have drug trafficking through the Caribbean on fishing vessels, on go-fast vessels, toward Puerto Rico, toward the Dominican Republic, toward Central America. And so we continue to have robust counter-drug operations in the Caribbean essentially at all times. Then on the migrant side, sometimes migrant smuggling organizations will try to take advantage of perceived kind of distraction of the Coast Guard. Because we're working so heavily on recovery in Puerto Rico, there was a little bit of a surge of migration from Dominican Republic toward Puerto Rico. They thought maybe we didn't have our eye on the ball, but together with interagency partners, we continue to counter that and interdict migrants at sea as well.
Thank you for joining us this week for part 1 of our 2-part discussion with Admiral Brown. Make sure you tune in next week, and we're going to have the second part in this series. Make sure you subscribe to this channel so you get notified when we put out new videos on the video blog side, on our life and events, and our Tuesday Insights. Also, connect to us through our social media and join the conversation. Those links are detailed in the banner above and also in the comment section below. Make sure you hit that like button for all the videos you like. If there's anything from a company perspective we can do for you for maritime risk management, regulatory compliance, or maritime security, don't hesitate to reach out to us because we're always happy to steer you in the right direction.